What was considered a dream after years of hard work has now become a reality. Ethiopia inaugurates one of the biggest dams in the world. Welcome to Business Zone. I am Yemisi Lanredo. Many thanks for joining us again. Ethiopia has inaugurated a hydroelectric dam that aims to double the country's electricity output. The Gaib tree is expected to produce 1,870 megawatts of power, enough to sell energy abroad, including neighboring Kenya. The dam has been generating electricity for about a year now, and it is the third largest dam in Africa and the biggest in a series built along the Omo River, reaching 243 meters in height. And with no natural gas or oil reserves of its own, the Horn of African country is banking on renewable energy to help foster energy independence and economic growth. Ethiopia aims to produce 15,000 megawatts of electricity through its dams in the coming 5 years, and Gaib 3, located at about 350 kilometers southwest of Addis Ababa, took 9 years to build, and it cost $1.6 billion, with 60% of financing coming from the Chinese export credit agency, China Exim Bank. Well, this dam, as we said, is among the biggest in Africa, but there are concerns about its impact on downstream and upon neighboring countries. Well, Ethiopia aims to produce 15,000 megawatts of electricity through its dam in the coming years, but how achievable this will be, time would definitely tell. But officials say that Gaib 3 makes Ethiopia one of the biggest producers and consumers of renewable energy in Africa. And experts also say this will definitely impact on the country's economy. Gaib 3 dam cost about $1.7 billion to build. Of course, we know that some 40% of that amount was covered by the Ethiopian government, while the remaining 60% has been obtained through a loan from the Chinese government. But the controversy has always been that the dams could lead to loss of livelihood and increase to local conflicts. Ethiopia has an abundant rainfall in the parts of the country that supply the dams with water to produce hydroelectricity. But what if what if this abundant supply of rainfalls dry up? How does it produce this? And would it continue to bring in foreign direct investments into the economy of Ethiopia? We'll have answers for you later on, in the course of this bulletin, or maybe later on Business Zone. All right, let's see some other news now. The African Union Commissioner for Trade and Industry, Fatima Haram Asil, has been speaking on the necessity of intra-African trade there.
You know, when you talk about, continental free trade area, when we talk about trades, when we talk about trade facilitation, you have to ask your question, trade for who? And in general, the African Union Commission, we just meet, Minister of Trade meet, discuss the trade agenda, discuss the trade facilitation, discuss the continental free trade area. But really, government is there to put the enabling environment, which is a continental free trade area, to negotiate. For example, when we go to the conference in Bali, for the WTO, World Trade Organization, it's Minister of Trade that actually, signed the agreement. But really, we need to put enabling environment for the private sector. So it's very important that we engage the private sector well ahead of time to see how can we discuss, how do we make sure that we involve them from that early stage, so that once implementation of that agreement will be very, very easy. The civil society is very important to talk, because the African Union is about the people, it's the agenda of the people. So it's very important to bring the parliamentarian, the civil society, and also the researchers, to see how the research institutions on trade issues can really help us to deal with the issues and further our integration agenda. So we thought that really it's important to create a forum whereby all the stakeholders involved are there. But we didn't want to limit ourselves to Minister of Trade, because if you look at the trade facilitation, Minister of Trade signed the agreement. The implementers are Minister of Finance because, the custom procedures, the border procedures, it's really, through the custom, and the the custom report to the Minister of Finance. So it was important to also have Minister of Finance, Minister of Trade, Minister of Transport, because you have to talk about corridor and therefore, and everybody else. So that was where the idea came from.
Well, the AU Commissioner also highlights some of the challenges facing trade relations on the continent.
These are measures that exist, is true, but they're not the only problem. For example, if you look at UK, they didn't industrialize because they have all the infrastructure. They went through the route of industrial park. So there is way around it. The good news is our leaders are aware of all of these challenges, whether being infrastructure, the non-trade barriers, the corruption. Illicit flow is one that is very, very important, that is not just engaging, government, it's also engaging foreign companies. So they're all aware of all of these issues, and they want to tackle them all together. So we want to talk about prosperity of Africa, but we don't want to talk about industrialization after the infrastructure is being solved. Why is Africa going to do it differently from the rest of the world? In this country of Ethiopia today, yes, the political will is very, very clear, and they're going to have a lot of industrial park that is going to be creating a lot of jobs. So once you look at, proper location for the industrial park, you will have everything sufficient, like the water, the electricity, the energy that is required, the raw material that we have. And therefore, when you develop this and then you create the job and then it has been successful, the revenue from this can help to develop other areas. So I think it's very important that we look at these things in tandem, in parallel, not just to say we must have everything that we need in infrastructure in order for us to industrialize. Others did not do it that way, and I think Africa should not do it that way.
Well, Fatima says the ease of moving goods and services on the continent will further boost African economic development.
I think it's a very, very good question. Continental free trade area is about movement of goods and also movement of services. And when you talk about movement of services, you talk about movement of person. The do not move themselves. So it's important to talk about movement of person. And that's why actually the last summit in Kigali in July of 2016, Head of State and Government has launched an African Union passport. They have launched that passport, they gave it to the Head of State, they gave it to the First Ladies, and this passport is going to be given to all our national government so that they can issue, is it going to be a diplomatic passport, a regular national passport, a service passport, because it's going to be very difficult for the African Union to categorize that type of things, so that we have an African passport so that we can move freely into that continent. It's a very, very critical issue, because when you talk about movement of people, you're also talking about movement of talent. You're not talking just about movement of goods. And that our youth are dying, going for to Europe, dying in the Mediterranean. And I think that it's very, very important that we also talk about movement of goods and person, so that movement of talent, people can also go from one country to another, from one region to another, and to work.
African Union Commissioner for Trade and Industry, Fatima Haram Asil. All right, we'll take a break on Business Zone now, and we'll be back with more stories. It's Business Zone on TVC News. It's a few days to Christmas, and prices of staple food continue to soar in Nigerian markets. And TVC News business crew went to some of the markets in Lagos, the commercial hub of the country, to feel the pulse of citizens.
These old layers, we sold it like 1,300, 1,400, 1,500, but now it's 2,000 naira each. And the white one, last year we sold it 3,200, now it's 4,000 naira.
2015 is more better than the 2016. Bag of rice was 8,000 naira per bag. Now at the rate of 19,000 naira. The difference is much. Actually, it's not everybody can afford the money right now. Actually, some people are buying like 2 bags, 1 bag, 3 bags, but they cannot even afford half bag. Because for you to see how terrible things is now.
The thing 2015, I buy fish, croaker, 13,000, 12,000, but now 25, 24. It's too much.
The difference between the prices, because as of last year, we sell kilo like 650, 700, but this year, around 900.
This artist in the mouth of the market women in Lagos, Nigeria. Now, economist and market analyst Nnameka Oberiri speaks on how inflation is telling on Nigerians and how they can be encouraged to save during the Yuletide period.
Things have actually doubled in prices. The consumer price index has been on a high. Remember, this time last year, the inflation rate was at about 6.7 to 7%. Today is at 18.4%. A bag of rice that sold for 8,000, 9,000. Today is 20,000. Honestly, my heart goes out to most Nigerians, especially those who live at the lowest base of the economic pyramid. I begin to imagine how a man on a minimum wage of 18,000 per month will survive under this kind of atmosphere, especially those who are married. It's just a practical example. This afternoon, I sent somebody out, one of my domestic staff, to go and get me a carton of Andrea wine. And interestingly, something that I used to sell for 14,000 naira today, he just called me and said that is now 20,000. He wanted to buy 2 cartons. I told her, please do only 1 carton. It's really, Nigerians are really stretched. And how we got to this level is something that is beyond belief. Remember when we came into this new regime, there was so much hope, the goodwill was up there in the sky. Nigerians felt that, wow, they've just arrived at El Dorado, paradise. Now, things are beyond our expectations. It is abysmally beyond our expectation. And this season, I'm sure most homes, I just did a satirical post and I said, anyone who cannot lay hand on a bag of rice can do with cocoyam. After all of them are kabal, but it's very funny. It sounded funny, people laughed over it, but I'm telling you, things are really, really out there. And hoping that things will be better in 2017, but 2016 is nothing to write home about. And I will also advise the consumers, people should be very, very mindful of that. After this Christmas, there's going to be January. School fees will need to be paid. New house rent will have to be paid. People must, if you don't do this Christmas, you can also do next Christmas. And I also want to use the opportunity to implore those those in leadership at various levels and tiers of governance. Nigerians are hurting. Nigerians are bleeding. Whatever we can do to put this country out of the wood, we must do it. And we owe it as a responsibility to Nigerians to begin to tell us the truth.
Yes,
we are told that last quarter we'll get out of recession last quarter. December is the end of last quarter, and we are nowhere out of recession. In fact, the way it is looking, I as if we are slipping into depression. As I'm talking to you, a liter of AGO is the commonly known as diesel, is now selling at 230 naira. As at December 2015, I'm a produce seller, so I sell commodities, I sell oil. As at December 2015, a liter of AGO was selling at 92 naira. Now, just check the difference. From 92 naira a liter of diesel now is selling 235 naira. And remember that most of the vehicles that are used to truck these products from the hinterland, the man diesel, the DAF, uses diesel. So the driver will add his cost. The person who is producing these goods will also add his cost. And remember again, even the locally produced rice, the machineries that are used to produce this rice, that are used to smash it, that are used to separate it, are also imported. The spare parts are also imported. So when you aggregate all this, you will discover that on average, it affects every value chain, every produce line in Nigeria. Now, enough of lamentation, enough of woe. How do we get out of this? How do we ensure by 2017, we do not buy a bag of rice at 8,000 naira? How do we ensure by 2017 December, we do not buy a liter of diesel at 300 naira or a liter of PMS at 160?
Financial analyst Emeka Obiari is speaking on the inflation in Nigeria. But on the more optimistic side, President Muhammadu Buhari has said that there's about 7.3 trillion budget that was passed last week, thereabout, would actually steer the country out of recession. And we also know that he said that agriculture will be made to be the mainstay of the economy. Well, time will actually tell how that would eventually turn out. But in other news, the senior special assistant to the president on foreign affairs in Nigeria, Abike Dabiri-Erewa, believes diaspora funds can help lift the country out of recession. Well, she said this while seeking the collaboration of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. In this regard, Dabiri-Erewa wants the FIRS to put in place incentives that will encourage Nigerians abroad with investments in the country to willingly pay tax. The FIRS agrees with her suggestions and says these will go a long way to boost the country's tax revenue.
Bringing in vital equipment, there could be tax holidays for them, working with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Trade and Investment, which is already being done, not just for Nigerians in diaspora, but for foreigners willing to invest. So take agriculture, for instance. There are a lot of them who, for instance, government is saying you want to invest, these are the incentives for you. For instance, land is there, everything is there. You bring in your money, we provide the infrastructure, we provide the enabling environment. So the more we do that, the better. And like I said, at this point in time when we're in recession, Nigerians in diaspora have a critical role to play. It was done in Ireland. 1,000 Irish got together, saved Ireland from recession. But they looked for them, they engaged them. That is what we are doing. And we're meeting with them, getting them together. And you know what is good news about Nigerians in diaspora? As I speak to you, 20 are home now.
But what it will do is that it will bring in funds for investments. And when you have an investment, it creates jobs, which brings about taxation. It creates businesses, which brings about employment and more taxation. So as our brothers and sisters abroad send this money home, and this money starts to work for them also, it will also work for the country.
And maybe youth empowerment will continue to be on the front burner of this administration. That's coming from the federal government. Well, the acting managing director of the Bank of Industry at the second phase of the government's funding scheme explained that opportunities abound for members of the National Youth Service Corps as the Graduate Entrepreneurship Fund remains available for them to access. He added that the ultimate aim of the scheme is to encourage graduates undergoing the compulsory one-year NYSC program to venture into business and become employers of labor rather than job seekers.
This is a very, very good idea. I was actually telling some of my colleagues that I'm happy it's happening during in my own time, because it's a good opportunity for young Nigerians, we graduates like us, because most times many of us, there's a high rate of unemployment in this country, so it is a perfect opportunity for many of us that have business ideas. This is a good platform for us to implement our business ideas, and a good way for it to be manifested.
I expect an opportunity whereby the youth will be empowered to be future entrepreneurs that will set this country on a greater height.
Out of the 800 plus who went through the program last year, more than 300 of those applied, and about 261 of them have actually benefited, and they are conducting their businesses. In other words, without the Bank of Industry, what would those 300 have been doing between last year and now? But we've been able to engage them in a constructive manner, in such a way that they have hope in themselves, right? They are seeing a bright future for themselves in Nigeria through a scheme provided by a federal government-owned institution.
The African Export-Import Bank and the Export-Import Bank of Korea have entered into a memorandum of understanding to inject $100 million to support trade between South Africa and Korea. Under the deal signed in Seoul, South Korea, by Afreximbank President Benedict Orama and his Kexim counterpart Lee Dong-hoon, Kexim will explore the possibility of establishing other financing schemes to promote trade between South Korea and Africa. Orama says credit facility is timely given Afreximbank's current focus on financing importation of capital goods to accelerate the structural transformation of African economies. In 2015, Africa's imports from South Korea stood at about $9.8 billion, down from $13 billion in 2014, while the continent's export to South Korea also declined to $5.8 billion in 2015. And the African Development Bank will serve as trustee of African Renewable Energy Initiative. It will also manage its resources towards increasing access to electricity in the continent. African heads of state and government have already requested the bank to host the independent delivery unit of the initiative. And commenting on the development, local energy operators say the initiative is timely. Rwandan government official in charge of infrastructure, Robert Nyavumba, said the scheme also promotes efficient energy use, all of which are within ideals espoused by the government as it pushes for universal access to power in the country. Now, last month, Rwanda joined a global universal energy initiative, Sustainable Energy for All, a United Nations-led scheme geared towards actions that aim at positively transforming the world's energy systems. The IMF says Kenya's national savings will rise to 16.1% of GDP by the end of 2016, surpassing the average for middle-income countries in Africa after years of lagging behind. In a newly released regional economic outlook for sub-Saharan Africa, IMF says Kenya will be one of the 20 countries in Africa classified as middle-income economies to record an increase in gross national savings. And last year, Kenya's gross national savings stood at 12.7% of GDP, which was below the average of 14.7% for similar-sized economies in Africa. The rise in savings has coincided with a drop in borrowing, with Central Bank of Kenyan data showing that the annual growth in private sector credit dropped to 5.4% at the end of August compared to 18% at the end of 2015. Now in Tanzania, the Workers' Compensation Fund has raised $32 million since coming into operation in July for increased activities. The fund's Director General, Masha Monchaba, said that 189 workplace accidents had been recorded while claims for compensation had been lodged. The fund is responsible for compensating workers who suffer occupational injuries or illnesses, and also dependents of workers who die while on duty are compensated. The fund offers members benefits including medical aid, compensation for temporary disablement, compensation for permanent disablement, constant attendant care grant, and rehabilitation services. And just before we go, crude oil price stayed mixed in the global market Wednesday. At the London market, the Brent crude trades at the price tag of $55 per barrel as price improves by 33 cents in early trade. The OPEC basket price drops to $51 a barrel, and market watchers say crude prices may tip upward from January on the back of output cut by major producers. Well, that's Business Zone. I am Yemisi Landry Idowu, and up next is TVC News Hour Nigeria.